It was the spring of 1943. The world was engulfed in fire. Cities burned under the relentless thunder of bombs, and the skies over Europe trembled with the roar of aircraft that carried both hope and death. Thousands of miles away, in a sun-scorched training field in Tuskegee, Alabama, a small group of young African-American pilots prepared for a destiny they could scarcely imagine. Their hands gripped the controls of trainers and bombers alike, their eyes scanning the horizon, the weight of history pressing upon them with every heartbeat. For these men, the skies were more than a battlefield, they were a canvas, a symbol, and on this canvas they would paint a mark so bold, so unmistakable, that even the enemy would remember it. Bright red, brilliant, defiant, fiery red. The tails of their planes would blaze across the clouds like a declaration. We are here, we are proud, and we will not be overlooked. Every mission carried the tension of life and death. Every maneuver the silent prayer of a nation that doubted them, yet secretly rooted for them. The Tuskegee Airmen flew not only for victory in war, but for recognition, for dignity, for proof that courage knows no color. And as their bombers roared into the sky, scarlet tails slicing through the clouds, a legend was born. Allies began to request them specifically. Pilots trusted them instinctively, and the name Red Tails became synonymous with precision, bravery, and unyielding spirit. In a world on fire, their red tails were a promise of excellence, a warning to the enemy, a story etched forever into the skies. The choice to paint the tails of the P-51's Mustangs a bright, unmistakable red was far more than a mere act of decoration. It was a bold statement, a proclamation that could be read from miles above the earth, slicing through clouds, enemy fire, and doubt. In a world where every detail of war mattered, where precision could mean the difference between life and death, these men understood that identity was not just personal but tactical. Each plane, lined up on the runway beneath the harsh Alabama sun, gleamed like polished steel, yet it was the splash of red at the rear that commanded attention, demanding to be noticed. For the young pilots of Tuskegee, the red tail was a symbol of pride, an emblem of defiance against a military that had long questioned their abilities, their courage, and even their place in the skies. When the men first discussed painting their aircraft, there was no hesitation, only certainty. Red would not fade into the endless blue. It would not vanish against the grey of smoke-filled skies or the muted tones of European landscapes. Red was visible, bold, vibrant, a color that could not be ignored, a color that screamed presence. And in that screaming there was power. The decision was meticulous, almost ceremonial. Every brushstroke mattered. Each plane received the attention of a craftsman, not merely a mechanic, as the men understood the psychological weight carried by their choice. A red tail meant recognition, it meant intimidation, and above all, it meant identity. From the first flights, the impact of the red tails became undeniable. Enemy pilots would see the streaks in the sky, cutting through the haze, and instinctively know they were facing a squadron that could not be underestimated. The visibility of the tails was tactical as well as symbolic, allowing bomber crews to spot them in the chaos of escort missions, their guidance a steady hand amidst a storm of anti-aircraft fire. Within minutes of a mission, the red tails became a beacon, a symbol of reassurance to allies and an unspoken warning to the adversary. The color was no longer just paint. It had become a message written across the heavens. We are here, we are formidable, and we will not fail. The pilots themselves drew confidence from the red markings. Every time they climbed into the cockpit, adjusting their helmets and strapping themselves in against the vibration of engines and the jolt of takeoff. The red tail reminded them of who they were and why they flew. It was a daily affirmation of skill and identity, a connection to the countless men who had trained before them, facing prejudice on the ground, even as they aspired to dominate the skies. The psychological impact extended beyond their own squadron. The red tails became a point of inspiration across the Air Force. Crews on the ground and in the air began to recognize the planes by their signature markings, and respect followed swiftly behind recognition. The process of painting the tails was ceremonial in its own right. Mechanics and pilots worked together, carefully masking edges, mixing shades, and applying layer after layer of bright enamel. The red was chosen for its brilliance, its permanence, its intensity under sunlight and storm. In moments of downtime, the men would stand back and admire their handiwork, not for vanity, but for the message it conveyed. Each plane was more than a machine. It was a statement, a canvas, a flying declaration of excellence in the face of doubt. And as they taxied down runways for the first time with the red tails glinting in the early morning light, the symbolism was tangible. The aircraft became extensions of the pilots themselves, their courage painted for all to see. The impact extended beyond the airfields of Alabama. As the red tails flew into combat theaters across Europe and North Africa, the psychological significance of their appearance became evident. Enemy gunners would take note of the scarlet streaks moving in formation with bombers, and their response was often hesitation. The red tails, unmistakable in any lighting or weather condition, were instantly recognizable and became associated with precision, efficiency, and deadly skill. For bomber crews, the sight of red-tailed Mustangs overhead offered relief, an assurance that protection was near, that someone was watching the skies with unwavering vigilance. It was a subtle form of psychological warfare, a silent communication that went beyond words or reports. The red tails were visible proof of courage and reliability. Beyond combat, the red tails carried a symbolic weight that resonated across the segregated military. These pilots, facing systemic prejudice and scrutiny, asserted their identity boldly in a domain where color should have no bearing on capability. In painting the tails red, they claimed the sky as their own, defying a world that had often denied them recognition. Each aircraft that took off with a crimson rear became a statement against prejudice, a flying banner of perseverance and excellence. It was artistry and audacity intertwined, a refusal to be invisible in a war that demanded attention and action. The red tail also fostered camaraderie and pride within the squadron. Each pilot understood that their machine was a reflection of their skill, their courage, and their collective identity. The shared experience of applying the paint, of maintaining its sheen in the field, of flying with that emblem into battle, strengthened the bonds between men who trusted each other with their lives. The visual uniformity created by the red tails was more than aesthetic. It was a unifying symbol, a constant reminder of their shared mission and shared struggle, a declaration that they stood together against both enemy fire and societal limitations. By the time the red tails reached Europe, the legend of their bright red planes had already begun to take shape. Stories circulated among bomber crews and commanders about the pilots who were instantly recognizable, reliable, and relentless. The red tails were no longer just paint on metal. They were a living symbol of trust, courage, and excellence. Allies would request the red tails for missions specifically, seeking the protection and skill that these airmen brought. In the vast expanse of wartime skies, amidst clouds of flak and smoke, the red tails became synonymous with a new standard of aerial mastery, a promise of protection, and a mark of defiance against those who doubted them. Every mission flown under the gleaming red tails strengthened the narrative. Each dive, turn, and dogfight reinforced the psychological significance of their choice. Enemy forces began to recognize the pattern. But recognition did not always mean understanding. They saw red and felt the intimidation of skill and precision. For the men of Tuskegee, the red tails were proof that identity could not be erased, that excellence would shine through, and that even in a segregated military, their courage and talent could not be ignored. In retrospect, the decision to paint the tails red was a stroke of genius, blending strategy, symbolism, and psychology. It was a choice rooted in pride, necessity, and vision, a visual representation of courage soaring high above the battlefield. The red tails became a language of their own, read by allies and enemies alike. They transformed the squadron into an icon, and every pilot who climbed into a cockpit beneath the glinting sun understood that they were part of something larger than themselves, something immortal, something that would echo through history. The red tails earned their reputation not on the airfields or in training, but in the unforgiving skies of combat, where every second was measured in life and death, and every decision could alter the course of a mission. As the Tuskegee Airmen took off on their first escort missions, the tension in the cockpits was palpable. Engines roared, instruments hummed, and the vibration of the propellers reverberated through their bodies. Yet amid the cacophony, a singular focus prevailed: protect the bombers. The men had been meticulously trained for these moments, and every maneuver, every turn, every climb was executed with a precision that would become legendary. The bright red tails of their P-51 Mustangs streaked through the sky, a visual signature that announced their presence and reassured the crews below. Bomber formations were vulnerable. Flying heavy, slow aircraft over enemy territory meant exposure to flak ground fire and enemy fighters waiting to strike. Without reliable escort, losses could be catastrophic. The arrival of the red tails often marked the turning point in these perilous journeys. As they swooped into formation, their coordination was flawless, almost choreographed. Pilots adjusted to turbulence and evasive maneuvers with uncanny precision, ensuring that every bomber beneath their protection remained shielded from enemy attacks. To the men below, these red-tailed Mustangs were more than machines. They were guardians, vigilant and fearless. The trust they inspired was instantaneous. Requests for red-tail escorts began to multiply, and word of their skill spread quickly through the Allied air forces. It was not only their skill, but their audacity that earned respect. The Tuskegee Airmen often faced missions that were more dangerous than those assigned to other squadrons, yet they flew with unwavering commitment. They confronted enemy fighters head-on, weaving and diving through clouds of flak, often putting themselves directly between the bombers and imminent destruction. Their tactics were innovative, refined through relentless training and an intuitive understanding of aerial combat. Enemy pilots learned quickly. To see red was to encounter relentless precision, a squadron that would not yield, a force that struck decisively and disappeared into the sky. Every engagement reinforced the reputation of the red tails, solidifying their status as some of the most formidable pilots of World War II. The psychological impact of their presence cannot be overstated. For bomber crews, seeing the red tails overhead was an almost tangible relief. Anxiety that had gripped them during the long stretches of flight over hostile territory would dissipate at the sight of those vibrant tails. In the chaos of anti-aircraft fire, in the deafening thunder of explosions, and in the shadow of the looming threat of enemy fighters, the red tails were a symbol of hope and reliability. Crews began to request them specifically for their missions, often negotiating assignments to ensure the Tuskegee Airmen would be their escort. This trust, earned in the sky, was a silent acknowledgement of the airmen's skill and bravery, and it transcended prejudice, recognition given purely for competence and courage. Beyond escort missions, the Red Tails executed offensive operations with the same precision and fearlessness. They engaged in strafing runs, disrupted enemy formations, and carried out reconnaissance, all while maintaining the integrity of their protective role. Their ability to adapt to rapidly changing situations in mid-air demonstrated a level of skill that was both awe-inspiring and intimidating. Enemy pilots who had expected an easy target were often caught off guard by the coordination, tenacity, and tactical intelligence displayed by the Red Tails. With every encounter, they not only completed their mission objectives, but also redefined the perception of African-American pilots in the broader military hierarchy. The squadron's cohesion and discipline were critical to their success. Each Red Tail pilot understood that the life of another depended on their precision. Communication, timing, and split-second judgment were essential, and these men executed every maneuver with the intensity of a shared purpose. The vibrant Red Tails helped maintain formation awareness in the heat of battle, reducing the risk of collisions, disorientation, or miscalculations. They were both practical and symbolic. Practical for coordination and safety, symbolic as a badge of courage and identity. Each successful mission strengthened not only their tactical reputation, but also their legacy, proving that excellence knows no racial boundaries. Stories of the Red Tails' bravery soon became legend. Bombers that had been escorted by the squadron returned safely where others had faltered. Pilots recounted how the red-tailed Mustangs would dive between them and enemy fighters with calculated aggression, breaking enemy lines and enabling bombers to complete their objectives. Their precision and calm under fire were unmatched, earning admiration from comrades and superiors alike. These accounts spread quickly through the ranks, and soon, the request for Red Tail escorts was no longer a matter of preference, but a matter of survival. Their reputation became synonymous with trustworthiness, courage, and unshakable skill. In addition to tactical brilliance, the Red Tails brought an emotional weight to their missions. Each bomber they protected represented not only a strategic target, but also the lives of men whose families awaited their return. The responsibility was immense, and the airmen carried it with solemn pride. Their red tails became symbols of that responsibility, a visible promise that they would guard those lives with unwavering dedication. The psychological reassurance they offered to bomber crews created an almost sacred bond between escort and escorted, one written not in words but in action, sacrifice and trust. Every engagement in the skies further reinforced the dual role of the red tails as both protectors and symbols. Enemy pilots would see the streaks of red and experience a moment of hesitation, a recognition of skill and audacity. Allied pilots, in contrast, would see those same streaks and feel a surge of confidence, knowing that someone of unmatched precision and courage was watching over them. The effect was cumulative, building a legend in real time, a narrative of valor and reliability that would transcend the war itself. Even in the most harrowing missions, when skies were filled with smoke, flak, and the whine of approaching fighters, the Red Tails maintained composure. They adapted, improvised, and executed with unmatched precision. Their skill was complemented by an unwavering sense of duty, a commitment to their mission, and a profound understanding that their actions represented more than individual success. They represented the fight against both tyranny and prejudice. The Red Tails were a visual manifestation of that commitment, a signal to allies and enemies alike that these pilots were not to be underestimated. By the end of each mission, the impact of the Red Tails was unmistakable. Bombers reached their targets intact, lives were saved, and the enemy had learned a hard lesson. The Tuskegee Airmen were not just capable, they were exceptional. The Red Tails were more than a paint choice. They were a testament to skill, courage, and the relentless pursuit of excellence in the face of overwhelming odds. Every mission flown under their wings added to a legacy that would endure for generations. A legacy that proved that talent and determination could not be constrained by prejudice, but instead would blaze across the skies in a streak of brilliant red. The war eventually ended, as all wars do, leaving behind shattered landscapes, exhausted soldiers, and the echoes of battles that had reshaped the world. But while cities smoldered and nations struggled to rebuild, the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen, the Red Tails, soared far beyond the skies they had conquered. Their impact was not measured merely in the number of missions flown, the bombers protected, or the enemy planes downed, though those feats were extraordinary. It was measured in the hearts and minds they had changed, the barriers they had broken, and the symbol they had etched into history. That courage, skill, and excellence know no color. Long after the engines cooled and the P-51 Mustangs were retired to museums, the story of the Red Tails endured, a beacon for generations yet to come. Returning to a world still deeply segregated, the Red Tails faced challenges far different from those they had encountered in combat. They were hailed as heroes overseas, yet at home. They confronted the bitter reality that their society still questioned their abilities and worth. Still, the experiences of the war had instilled in them an unshakable sense of pride and purpose. They had proven themselves in the most extreme circumstances imaginable, and that knowledge could not be taken away. The Red Tails, once streaking across European skies, became symbols of defiance and achievement, not only in military circles, but in the broader struggle for civil rights. These men had flown with precision, courage, and honor, and those qualities would become cornerstones of the fight for equality at home. Museums, historical exhibitions, and countless documentaries would later immortalize the Red Tails. Young visitors, decades removed from the roar of battle, would stand beneath the gleaming fuselages, red tails catching the light, and imagine the courage it had taken to navigate flak-filled skies. Children and aspiring pilots would hear stories of missions flown with flawless coordination, of lives protected by men who defied both the enemy and prejudice, and feel the weight of history pressing with inspiration. Each display, each narrative, preserved not only the mechanical marvels of the P-51 Mustangs, but the spirit of the pilots who had given them life. Their story became an enduring lesson that talent and determination could shatter stereotypes and change perceptions forever. The legacy of the Red Tails also lived on in the pilots themselves, many of whom went on to careers that continued to challenge societal norms. They became educators, leaders, and mentors, sharing their experiences with younger generations, instilling in them the values of resilience, courage, and excellence. The symbolism of the red tail was not confined to airfields or museums. It was carried forward in speeches, writings, and classrooms. Their example served as a living testament to what could be achieved when talent and determination were paired with unwavering courage, and their story inspired countless young Americans to pursue careers in aviation, the military, and beyond. Even in cinematic portrayals and literature, the red tails captured imaginations. Their image, emblazoned on screen and in print, was instantly recognizable. A scarlet streak across the sky, daring, defiant, and unyielding. These portrayals honored not only the tactical genius of the Tuskegee Airmen, but also the deeper, symbolic message that identity, pride, and excellence are inseparable. The red tails became shorthand for bravery, a vivid reminder that even in a segregated world, the actions of a determined few could resonate across continents and generations. They were celebrated as icons of American history, not merely for their wartime accomplishments, but for the cultural shift they represented. The impact of the red tails extended into policy and institutional recognition. Their performance during World War II provided undeniable evidence that segregation in the armed forces was not only morally indefensible, but strategically unnecessary. In the years that followed, the achievements of the Tuskegee Airmen contributed directly to the eventual desegregation of the U.S. military. Leaders cited their bravery, precision, and success under pressure as proof that American service members were just as capable as any others. Their legacy became both a historical and practical force, shaping the military, inspiring reforms, and ensuring that future generations would face fewer barriers in the pursuit of excellence. The emotional resonance of the red tails endured. Long after the last Mustang had landed, veterans would recount missions in which they had witnessed comrades dive through clouds of flak, maneuvering with perfect timing to shield bombers below. They spoke of the confidence they felt seeing those streaks of red against the sky, a combination of reassurance, awe, and admiration that transcended the immediate dangers of combat. This emotional legacy was as important as any historical record, as it captured the human element of courage, loyalty, and sacrifice that defined the red tails. Their story was not only about planes or battles. It was about the lives they touched, the trust they earned, and the hope they inspired in every ally they protected. Educational programs and commemorative events continue to honor their achievements. Aviation academies, flight schools, and youth organizations use the story of the red tails as a blueprint for excellence, teaching aspiring pilots not just how to fly, but how to lead, persevere, and break barriers. Their influence permeates beyond the military into civil rights, leadership, and education. The red tails are more than a historical symbol. They are a guiding principle for courage and achievement, a visual metaphor for reaching beyond limitations and defying expectations. Today, the image of the red tails soaring across a sunset sky serves as both inspiration and reminder. It reminds us of the transformative power of courage under pressure, of the significance of identity and pride, and of the enduring influence of those who dare to excel against the odds. They left behind not just a legacy of aerial mastery, but a narrative of hope, resilience, and the triumph of spirit over prejudice. Across museums, classrooms, and documentaries, across the hearts of those who hear their story, the red tails continue to fly, eternal streaks of brilliance against the canvas of history. Through every retelling, the red tails remain more than pilots. They are a symbol that excellence cannot be denied, that courage inspires generations and that identity, boldly embraced, leaves a mark that transcends time. They taught the world that the skies do not discriminate, but society often does, and that in defiance of such discrimination, greatness can shine, painted in the boldest, most unforgettable shady red.